Well, good afternoon, everybody. And we come to this, which I consider a very important subject, strategies for successful medical writing. And the session is in collaboration with our official journal, which is AsiaIntervention Journal. Number one is that seeing your name as the first author in an article gives you immense pleasure. I remember 1979 when I published my first article. Article was on systolic time intervals, which were determined by ECG, phonocardiography, and other things. And it came. I must have read that article, title, and my name 20 times during the day. I was in the OPD again and again, turning to that page. So that is what the pleasure you get. And if that article is published in an index journal, is an international journal, high impact factor journal, it is, absolutely fantasy and fantastic. So we have our guest of honor, Professor Jean-Marco. We have discussants, Dr. Bashir Hanif from Pakistan, Wan Azman, Wan Ahmed from Malaysia, and Afzalur Rahman, who could not come because of some injury, is in Dhaka. He will be joining with us. And Nitish Naik is also joining us virtually. So may I request Professor Jean-Marco to give us our usual words of wisdom.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to open this session entitled Strategies for Successful Medical Writing. It's a great honor for me. I have one message. Knowledge is a big subject, but ignorance is a bigger one. And it is ignorance, not knowledge, that is a true engine of the science. Writing on an abstract or a paper for publication require rigor, method, and is time-consuming. But by doing that, you will learn on how to adopt a method, how to adopt rigor in the application of the step-by-step approach, how to select the correct definition of term used, and getting the reflex of critical thinking. Starting with this question, where is our ignorance? What we don't know, and not what we know. What are the essential questions, and for what purpose? How to do, and when. A better understanding on how the scientists use ignorance to program their work, to identify what should be done, what the next steps are, and where they should concentrate their energy could be helpful to driving you toward the success. Linking your work to other research by re-examining apparently settled issues, using small questions to ask larger ones, and approaching a problem out of curiosity will bring you satisfaction for a well-done task. And you will follow this rule of rigor in all your day-to-day tasks. Ultimately, you will enhance your professional skill to accomplish your basic daily tasks and gain the recognition and credibility of your peer. I fully agree with the introduction. If we read the paper we published 40 years ago, we say, this was a stupid question. But what will remain is the rigor of how to select the good word, how to follow a method of rigor, how to use the good term. Have a nice session, I'm sure. Thank you very much.
So I'll just now update what we have done in our journal. Of this session are number one, how to write a good and manuscript which is likely to be published. Number two, very often the article comes back for you for revision, modifications, then will be how to respond to that. And number three is how you promote your article once it is published on the social media so that wider dissemination of what you have done. So let me come to our journal, and the journal is AsiaIntervention, and I'm lucky to have an excellent board of doctors as deputy editors, advisory editors, section editors, and we have, section editors for every small subset of intervention cardiology. And we are blessed to have a team of well-known deputy editors from various countries of the region. As you know that the journal is the official organ of the Asia-Pacific Society of Interventional Cardiology. Now, the journal, although we started in 2016 on the lines of our, mentor journal, the Euro Interventions, but between 16 and 21, there were some hiccups. So we decided to re-galvanize the journal in May 21. We started with a new website, and the first issue after re-galvanizing the journal came in December 21. And since then, it is going on. At present, we bring out 2 issues in a year. The journal was indexed on the PubMed in January this year, and also last month it has been indexed on the Scopus, is accepted, and we have applied for impact factor application, and the result is pending. Now, as you know, the number of users has been steadily increasing over the years. The number of views on the website is also considerably, large, and it's increasing. And now that we have a very good website, very few people go and download the article because you can view it online anytime. So that is the reason you see reduction in the downloads, but, ascent in the views. Now, as you can see, online readers, obviously Asia is the largest number of online readers, but we have online readers from Europe, North America, Australasia, and also Africa, and even South America. Now, one of the highlights of this is you can get the new journal, which is basically, I call it a jumbo issue, 128 pages. We used to be over 50 to 60 pages. And we also have this issue of strategies for medical writing. And the last thing which we have done is that we have also started first ahead of print paper, which is placed online before the assigned issue. And this time it is the WIN-EPSI Committee, a Nexus for the Development and Inclusion. So what's our plan? The next issue is going to come, after this is going to come around the Tokyo Valves and India Live, that is in February, March of 2023. Then the subsequent issue is going to come in summer of 2023. We'll decide the timing. And then the third issue is going to fall around the same time as our next AICT-AsiaPCR meeting. So I would request all of you to submit now so that our journal grows. The quality of the articles is improving. The number of articles is increasing. And to give you an example, this week we have received already 4 new manuscripts. So that shows the popularity of the journal. Thank you very much. So I think we'll go ahead and start with Dr. Ganesan Karthikeyan talking about how to write a manuscript which makes a good impression.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Professor Kaul, for giving me this opportunity to speak here. I'm going to be very brief. I thought it should be more of an interactive session than anything else.
Louder, please.
It has to be higher. able to hear me? So I will start by giving you some bad news and then some good news. So this is the bad news. So this is I just did a search of acceptance rates for common, the top cardiology journals. If you see, the range for the top 3 journals is under 10% acceptance rate, and for the next rung of journals is between 10 and 20%. So you have anybody who submits a paper has a 1 in 10 chance to, at best, a 1 in 20 chance, 1 in 20 to 1 in 10 chance. But the good news is that there are now, the publishing model of most journals is becoming open access. So here you have a much higher acceptance rate. So this helps people who have funded research, because most funded research needs to be published in open access journals. So here the open access journals, especially, there are even medical journals like PLOS Medicine or other journals which acceptance rates very high. So this is some good news. But there's another bit of good news which is related to the title of this topic. So this is a graph. I just want you to have a look at it. So I will not tell you which journal this is. This is actually, maybe I should not be sharing it here, but still. If you see the top part of the blue curve, this is the instant rejection rate of any journal. So this is when the editor-in-chief or the associate editor sees the journal, sees the article and rejects it immediately. So the rejection rate for a good mid-level cardiology journal is about 60 to 70%. It may be higher for the top-level journals. But you'll see that once it goes through that first step, then the acceptance rate is quite reasonable. So in fact, this is acceptance rate out of the 40 articles which were retained. So it's actually close to 50%. So you need to cross that first hurdle. So the whole idea of this paper today, this talk today, is to try and help you cross that first hurdle, making the first good impression in the beginning. So I just want to try and, these are not golden rules, but I just want to, as an editor of a journal and as somebody who's published a little bit, so I just want to suggest a few rules so that people can take away from here. So before we go to any rules, there are 3 absolute, to my mind, there are 3 absolute requirements for writing a paper. So first, you have to have good quality data or a great idea, either of these. So that's important. And you should have used appropriate methods for the analysis of presenting your data. The third thing is clarity of thought. You should be very clear about what your idea is and how to present it and how you're writing it. So we are talking only about number 3 here. So number 1 and number 2 are prerequisites for writing a good paper. Without that, you cannot write a good paper. So I've arbitrarily said there are 6 rules for writing a good manuscript. So rule number 1, you should have a story to tell. Without that, there is no manuscript. You have to have this idea in your head. You should have a clear flow of thoughts. And you should also have the time to tell the story. Paper cannot be written in 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It takes a lot of time. There is a lot of hibernation in your mind. The idea has to sit in your mind. It has to brew. It has to, it cannot be done in a jiffy. It cannot be done like that. If somebody has told you it can be done, then take it from me, it cannot be done. It cannot be a good paper then. So here, since Prof. Marco is here, I just wanted to talk about Jean-Luc Godard. If for any of you who follow French cinema, he's the, he's at the front of the French New Wave. So he said a film should have a beginning, middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order. Now, why am I bringing it here? Because when you sit down to write a paper, many of you might have this problem. So you have to start, it seems that you have to start with title, abstract, introduction, go on to the methods, results, and then discussions. That's very boring. That's not the way you should write a paper. You should be able to write a paper the way you like it. So I think the easiest part of the paper to write is the results section. You can always get it over with. Once you're done, then you can do anything else. You can write the introduction first, or you can write the discussion first if you know the results very well. So it doesn't have to be constrictive in that sense. You should not be constrained by any order. Of course, when there are some journals who accept manuscripts the way you want it to be published, but that's not the norm anymore. Norm still, but you'll have to format it, of course, later on, but the way you write it can be any way you want, and that helps you write. That's, to my mind, you should have a good story to tell, is rule number one. Rule number two is you have to write very simply and very clearly. There is no excuse for using jargon. There's no excuse for using complex words, long sentences. So I want to give you an example. This is the 1953 paper published in Nature. So just read the first paragraph of this. They simply start by saying, we wish to suggest a structure for the salt of DNA. This is the paper that got the Nobel Prize for Watson and Crick, if you recognize this. So there is no need to write in any complex way. This is they were describing the structure of DNA for the first time ever, and they chose to start like this. So this catches the attention, and it's very simple. And they went on. In fact, the paper is so short, you can still read it, and you can get an idea of what they're trying to say, even if you're not a specialist. So avoid jargon, write simple, small, short sentences, nothing more than that. Rule number 3, be very brief. When you can write three words, don't write 10 words. So this again is another classic paper. So this is the entire paper. I don't want you to read it, but this is the entire paper. It's 333 words. And this is John Nash's seminal paper on game theory, which is a complex subject. And he was able to convey his idea in 333 words. And you all also know he got a Nobel Prize for that. So when you translate this to our context, I think an introduction should not be longer than 200 or 250 words, which is roughly translating to 1.5 space in Word document, about 1 page, not more than a page. If it's extending beyond 1 page, there is a problem. You're not able to write clearly. And another rule which I often come across submitted manuscripts is that discussion is 10 pages long. So that's discussion cannot be longer than not too much longer than your results section. You just are placing the results in context, that's all. So a discussion cannot be interminably long. So brevity is very important to catch people's attention. Rule number 4, the abstract is almost everything, because that is the first thing that anybody sees. The editor-in-chief sees that and decides whether this goes to the associate editor or they reject it. So it's very, very important. So remember that when you write an abstract, once you read an abstract, it should be able to stand alone. It should be able to tell you everything about the study. It should have all the key elements, the design of the study, the number, type of patients, interventions, outcomes, results, everything should be very clear from the abstract. Nobody should have to go and read the paper to get some clarity once they have a good abstract. And I think the abstract and title go together. So title should be brief and informative, and it should not be laboriously long. It should not have jargon. It should not have technical terms, too much technicalities. But at the same time, it should be descriptive enough for the person who's reading to understand what this paper is all about. And one thing which I often see is that people exaggerate. So people tend to write that this is the first study which shows this, and this should change. Everybody should start taking this medicine, or things like that. So never exaggerate. Stay within what your data show. So you should not, the moment you exaggerate, then it puts people off. So people say that writing a cover letter is important, but in my experience, nobody reads a cover letter. You read the paper or you read the abstract. So the abstract is your cover letter. If you write a good abstract, it automatically goes through. I can assure you that. So this is just an example of a real paper. I will not tell you, I mean, this has not been published, obviously. So this is an example. So just read this title. I, for one, could not make out what this meant. And don't use words like evaluation. For example, what does evaluation mean? You want to say something, say precisely what it means. Evaluation is a very non-specific term. So your title should be precise and concise and tell what the study is all about. And this is the abstract, just the background section. I didn't put the entire abstract. So the abstract has mistakes. It has syntax errors. And it doesn't tell anything. And it tells things which are not necessary to be told. Coronary artery disease refers to narrowing or obstruction. That's not A cardiology audience already knows this. This is not part of your background. So don't write unnecessary things. So this is an extreme example, of course, but I mean, you get the idea. So your abstract has to be, your title and abstract have to be precise, they should be standalone, and they should be able to convey the essence of your study very clearly. Obviously, this has a high risk of instant rejection. This paper was instantly rejected from a mid-level cardiology journal. So rule number 5. Earlier I told you follow Jean-Luc Godard's way of writing anything you want, any way you want. But then when you submit it, you have to follow the rules of the game. You can't say that I will submit it, as results first and abstract at the end. So that doesn't work. So you have to adhere to the journal format, because the moment somebody sees it, they should not get put off by your lack of adherence to rules. So that's going to be very counterproductive. And when you write a paper, you should always follow appropriate reporting guidelines. For example, if you're doing a study, if you're doing a randomized trial, the consort flowchart and consort reporting format should be followed. And there are several guidelines, TROBE for observational studies and other guidelines. And always stick to word limits. Remember that when you write first time, you may extend beyond the word limit, but then you should always make the effort to shorten your manuscript to fit in with the requirements of the journal. The moment you send a very lengthy manuscript, for all the other reasons that we have said earlier also in the other rules, this is a big put-off for journals. Every journal has limited space, unless it's only online only, where there are really no limits. But if you want to submit to a very high-quality journal which has limited space, you have to stick to the word limits, and you have to stick to the number of recommended figures or tables and references. And one thing about figures and tables is use them appropriately. Don't repeat stuff which you've already written in the text and then you put it in the tables as well. So I often see that happening very often. So the same data are described both in the tables and in the text. So that is redundancy. Avoid redundancy. So that's very important. And finally, rule number 6, don't be too hard on yourself. Rejections are very common. Like I showed you, very few papers are really accepted to the top level cardiology journals. Publishing is really hard, and it requires a lot of focus, a lot of effort, a lot of time. So, and there are many, many variables that are beyond your control. Who sees the paper first? And so many things are there. So, and also sometimes when you get a rejection letter, it may be hurtful, but never take rejections personally. So otherwise, then you are completely discouraged from writing. This is especially true for people who are just starting out. There will always be rejections. You will have to persist, and you will ultimately find a journal. So I want to end on this positive note. Every decent paper that you write will ultimately find a home. There are many cardiology. This is just a Simago page. If you look at the journal list, what is the most positive thing is there are over 300 cardiology journals as of now. And you can, I'm sure, if you've written a decent paper, you will be able to publish it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karthikeyan, for this very lucid and logical presentation. And I'm sure that this is going to stimulate people how to improve their presentation and how to get into closer to the publication and not an instant rejection. So we can have some points of discussion. Let me start with Nitish because he is not here. Nitish, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
No. Dr. Bashir?
I think excellent review. What I feel is like I was in the US, I was trained there and came back to Pakistan, and I've been there for the last almost 15 years. Unfortunately, even in US, most of the training programs, or even during medical school or during training programs in cardiology, I'm sure with other specialties as well, there is really no proper training or mentoring how to really write or publish things. I think there is some requirement that you have to do some paper, and a lot of times they will somehow manage to get that done as a requirement, but after that, everything is gone again. And I myself really had a lot of trouble when I came back. I really wanted to do a lot of stuff and I had trouble, but I had to make extra efforts to try to learn these things. I don't know how this could be. I think this kind of sessions is an excellent resource to learn these things. But again, the interest is not there, and we can see by the number of audience here, this is unfortunate. But on one hand, we want, as you said, that as a first author, it's you feel so happy and so good, and also in jobs, your promotions and all those things are related to that. But unfortunately, we don't make an effort. People find ways around it instead of doing it themselves. I know in our country, in Pakistan, I'm trying to change it. During training, there is a requirement to have either a research paper or have what we call as dissertation. And a lot of people have found a way to get it done by someone else. They actually pay them and they will do it for them, and they won't make an effort to do it themselves. In our program, like my program over there, I have made sure that we try to do some mentoring and help them to be able to do it. But I think, I don't know how we can really motivate or incentivize our trainees, and even after training, to have these kind of mentoring or courses available where they can learn and do these things. Because a lot of people really don't know, as you mentioned those rules. But I have seen people, they wrote their first paper and got rejected, and they got so much demotivated. They said, we are not going to do it anymore because we are not able to do it and it's not going to happen. But you have to keep really making efforts and keep doing it. Then you will become really efficient in it and be able to do it. So this is what I feel. I think we need to make more efforts to be able to really make sure that we are able to create or generate some kind of interest in our trainees, because that's where you really start, and that's where it can actually help you to do it later on in life as well.
Yes, Nitish, you were there. I think there's a lag of time.
I completely agree.
Nitish?
It is quite a... am I audible?
Yeah.
So I do agree that, medical writing is something that most of our trainees don't have a great idea about. But I think so one of the key issues, like Karthik said, is that when you start writing an article, you should have a story to tell. And once you have a story to tell, you can develop on that idea. It's important that, you present it in simple language. You should have clear flow of thought, and that's what catches the eye of the editor and the subsequent reviewers who go through it. So while writing such an article is obviously difficult, the reading should be the easy part of it, and that's where I feel that most people lose out upon. And language often becomes a barrier, especially in Southeast Asia, because English is not the first language, and that is something that may come in the way. I think so. There, like the previous speaker said, there should be some ways to assist people in getting a better manuscript in position that conveys the idea that they would like to tell their readers.
Thank you. Professor Marco, I just wanted your view on professional writers are available these days. You give it to them, they write, sometimes they're not even doctors. So what is your impression of, how often, in what way should they be employed? They should not be employed at all?
So first, congratulations, you talk, that everything is on the talk. To answer to your question, I will report my mistake, my pitfall, and error. On the 17th century in France, a very famous lady, a reader, sent a letter to a friend and introduced a letter like this: sorry to send you this very long letter, but I didn't have a time to do shortest. And many times I forgot this message, and that you really. And then when we receive a paper for peer review, it's too long. Introduction is too long. Comments are too complex or too long. But it takes time. To shorten.
Okay, I think in the interest of time, we move. And coming to the very important part is that you have sent a paper. It has not been rejected upfront. It comes back to you with a number of queries. And how do you respond to them so that you don't, once for all, you answer all the queries and it gets in?
Yeah. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It is a pleasure for me to be here and to present today. So my task was to have a concept of a presentation of how to respond to peer review comments. And you will see that, and these are of course only my thoughts that are open for discussion. And what I thought was the first essential step when receiving the peer review comments is to understand what they want from you as an author. So I think that from understanding, the next step will be responding. But I think that the time should be taken and effort should be made to really understand the intention and the requests of the reviewers, because that is not always an easy thing to do. So what I try to follow and what I would like to open here for a discussion or to present here that would stand for open discussion is a 5-step process that would serve the purpose of initially understanding what the peer reviewers want. And basically, I think it's a sort of a small pyramid with going from more fundamental questions of the reviewers and ending with ones that are not as fundamental. So as you see, the first step is when the overall article methodology is challenged. I think that should be recognized promptly. Even if it's not laid out flat, it should be recognized, because if that's the case, then the reviewers might reject the manuscript. If the methodology does not serve the purpose and is not adequate, then that can hardly be rectified. And then interpretation of the primary findings, interpretation of the secondary findings as well. These results are there, but what can be challenged is how you interpreted them, and then the additional data that may be required and or additional analysis, which do not require additional data, but redoing of some of the analysis may be required. And then the two tacit messages from the very beginning would be, so if you go from 1 to 5, one more time, is to understand what is the intention of the reviewer. But then again, for each of these steps, I think we need to be aware that what we write is of interest for the journal and for the community. And I think if we write about something which is not of interest, then we may get rejected even though we have actually a high quality paper. And I think this should be kept in mind. This is sometimes unfair because the mood of the community is not always as it should be, and maybe you have a topic that is of interest, that could be of interest in the future, but if you do not have a topic that is of interest now, I think the chances are that the manuscripts can get rejected. Now, if we go through all these 5 steps, I would like to do it in an example that actually of a manuscript we submitted a few years back, and it was a randomized trial called Riddle Non-STEMI, and I learned a lot from this submission. Some of the comments are not real ones. I frame that and I phrase it so that I can prove some of the points that I thought were learning, at least for me, and that I wanted to share with you. So this trial was, as you can see, we used the PICOT method to analyze what was the trial about. So it was about non-STEMI patients who were admitted to hospital within 24 hours of their chest pain. All of those non-STEMI patients had ECG changes, which were pointing in the direction of acute ischemia. And the randomized arms were either immediate PCI, so immediate PCI for non-STEMI patients within 2 hours. It ended up being on a median 1.4 hours. And that was compared with the delayed PCI group, which was in median 61 hours after admission. And then the results were such that the primary endpoint, which was a composite of death and MI at 30 days, showed a benefit of immediate, of early PCI, and the follow-up at that time was available up to 1 year. In the meantime, we published a follow-up to 3 years. So basically, when we go now the step-by-step process, you will see that in the reviewers' comments, all of 5 steps were basically there. First, the most fundamental, what we thought, was the comment that challenged the overall article methodology. And it was about the peri-procedural MI. So the reviewer told us, well, look, you included in your MI definition, which was part of the primary endpoint, peri-procedural MI. Now, peri-procedural MI, per definition, and it stands now, the definition stands now as well in the guidelines, is not so easy. It requires more than 20% of troponin rise from a previous valley. So you had to have, if you have a non-STEMI patient, all of those patients in the immediate arm will probably not have a valley. They will have a rising troponin as you admit them. And those in the delayed group will have a valley. So you basically are confounding your findings in as much as you say, well, you are going to have a lot of peri-procedural MIs or the possibility to have a peri-procedural MI in the delayed group. And that is going to bias your outcomes. So from the onset, your methodology is not right. So we took this comment seriously, and this was our response. We said, you're right, this could be a problem, but there are 2 parts to our answer. First, we went through all peri-procedural MIs, and we said all were accompanied by new ECG changes, which we thought was a solid evidence of not just having a biomarker rise, which could bias the outcomes. And then secondly, the primary outcomes difference, and this we thought was very important, was not driven by them. It was driven by the excess of pre-catheterization MIs in the delayed group. So it did not matter what happened after PCI in the delayed group. What happened was that there were MIs happening while people were waiting with their non-STEMIs to be admitted to the cath lab and to be treated. So this is how we responded, and we thought that this could be a proper response. Then the second step, and we recognize this in the response in the reviewers' comments also, was the interpretation of the primary findings. So what we said our interpretation is the earlier PCI for non-STEMI is better than to wait. And then the reviewer said, well, your interpretation may not be correct because you're biased, and you're biased because of having a large delay in the delayed group. You waited for 61 hours. So the only reason why you have this difference is because you have a large difference between the 2 study arms in terms of how much time it passed by before you admitted people to the cath lab. We said, yeah, well, we agree. However, we designed our study based on the current guidelines in 2019, which allowed for 72-hour delay. And secondly, even more importantly, we think that this reflects contemporary practice. We think that in many geographies around the world, non-STEMI patients, and this was in 2016, will not go to the cath lab within 24 hours or within the first hours. They will go within a few days, if lucky. And we thought that our results, our interpretation, will be able to be applied to many centers around the world. Third step was interpretation of the secondary findings. So what the reviewers said is you did not mention baseline risk and how it affects outcomes, because we know from the non-STEMI patients that the baseline risk was actually supposed to guide the procedure. In the TMAX, the largest trial, which was similarly designed as ours, it was shown that if the baseline risk, according to the gray score, was high, those people should go immediately to the cath lab, or early in the cath lab. If the risk was not high, based on the gray score, then they could wait. So what happened in your trial? How did you risk stratify the patients? What we said is we actually had a whole homogeneous group that was high risk. So when we did the gray score, it did not change the outcomes, and we reported this as a subgroup analysis. However, bear in mind that the whole group of patients we included was a high risk because we had the non-STEMI, so we had troponin, and it was paired with acute ischemia on ECG. 80% had ST depression. If you go back to the TMAX trial and other similar trials on the topic, they included a mostly heterogeneous population of patients in whom some did not even have troponin rise, so were not non-STEMI. Ours were more homogeneous data set. And then they asked for some additional data, and my intention or my suggestion is whenever a reviewer asks for additional data, do everything to provide it. And if the expression of the reviewer is, please provide more data about baseline medication, specifically the rate of and type of anticoagulants and so forth, what we did, we provided what he asked for specifically. So we did not provide more medical data, as it said at the beginning in general. We provided what he specifically asked for. And I think that would be a good way to go. And then finally, even additional analysis was asked for, because despite randomization, there was more patients referred to CABG as non-STEMI in the delayed group. Now, the reviewers asked whether this impacts outcomes. So we did a sensitivity analysis. We excluded CABG patients, and then the results remained the same. However, what we also write to the reviewer, and what we think is important here, is it could be that there was actually a sort of a bias for the operators. If the non-STEMI case is coming to you immediately, you treat it as a primary PCI case, and you try to do as much as you can percutaneously. If the non-STEMI case survives without events and comes to you after a few days, you may look at it differently, and you may then be more prone to referring some of the multivessel disease patients to CABG. So we thought that this was reflecting how the operators are thinking in the cath lab for these kinds of patients. So what we discussed the 5 steps, or the 5, I think, important messages or important comments that the reviewers can make, and be aware of the number 1. Because if the methodology is challenged, then your outcomes or your primary conclusion will not stand. Because you base your primary conclusion, you take a message from the manuscript, you base it on your methodology. If that is challenged, do everything you can to rectify and to respond to that. That should not go unnoticed. Such a comment that challenges overall methodology should not go unnoticed. That should take first priority. So what we did not discuss, and I think it's even hard to discuss it, is if there are other intentions by the reviewers, that can happen as well. People can have similar work as you do, and that can play a role in their decision making. I don't think there is much we can do about that. And the second thing is the topic of interest. I mean, I think that if you follow the literature well, then you will know what is currently being discussed and you'll choose your research questions wisely. However, I have to be honest here, I don't think that's the end of the world. I don't think that the publishing should be the goal for itself. I think the goal should be to advance our knowledge. And if you have research questions that are relevant, but not in the current mode of discussion, I still think they should be addressed and submitted to journals. And then this is the last point. After analyzing what the reviewer said, I think when you're writing the manuscript, you should try to anticipate what are the questions that are relevant that can be raised, and you try already to address them in your manuscript. And these are 3 different types of articles that you may submit. I've had experience with all 3 of them, so this is my humble opinion. What are the important things not to be missed when you write the manuscript in anticipation of the reviewer's comments? So when you write about the randomized controlled trial data, like I just presented, all sorts of systematic bias should be addressed. So you should clearly state how the randomization was performed, how the concealment of allocation was performed. So all these things that show to the reviewers that you thought about eliminating bias, I think they should be clearly written in the manuscript. If you don't do it, they'll ask you for it. And then, of course, the results interpretation. It is an important thing because the results as such are presented in the results section, but then in the discussion session, as said, they're put into the context of current literature, and I think that is an important point as well. For registries and observational studies, which is probably most of the studies that we write about and that most of the manuscripts that we submit, I think we should be clear about the selection bias and how we accounted for the absence of randomization. And that should clearly be written in the manuscript because every observational trial basically has these problems. Every observational trial will have the problem that is not randomized, and that we may have selection bias, and we should be, I think, clear in the manuscript how we dealt with it. If not, many reviewers are just going to ask about that. And then the final is meta-analysis, which could be the most tricky one. It looks like it's easy because you get the statistical program, you collect already published data, and then you just do the meta-analysis. But I think that the interpretation of meta-analysis is very, very difficult, and we should be very cautious when writing meta-analysis and trying to formulate messages that are of relevance for our community in terms of everyday practice. What I think when you write meta-analysis is very important is to be clear about the statistical, but also protocol heterogeneity among different studies. So there is between and in-study heterogeneity, within studies heterogeneity, and there are ways to deal with heterogeneity in meta-analysis among the studies, like meta-regression or subgroup analysis. And I think that this should be taken care of before submitting, because if you do not do that, that is, I think, the major target of the reviewers when they read the meta-analysis. So in conclusion, I think that we should, as a first step, clearly understand the intention of the reviewer, and if the reviewer is in any of his or her comments challenging the overall methodology, that should be addressed as a first priority. Then we should try to differentiate comments that are related not only to methodology, but also to findings and additional data. When we differentiate among these comments, I think it'll be easier to answer them. And then finally, we should anticipate article type specific review questions, because each type of articles may have specific comments and specific points that need to be addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dijan. Now, have some time for discussion. Let me come to Azman. If the article provokes a lot of criticism, it is not rejected, but a lot of suggestions are given to you. Are there any situations in which you would take those suggestions and send it to some other journal because you think, in your mind that is too much now? Or, you would go ahead and respond to the same journal?
A very important question. To me, I think we can get more people attending this section if they realize the importance of getting the work published. And similarly, to respond to answer, they know that it's important to get the work to get that published, the perseverance. And you need to be perseverant to be able to respond to all these questions. For me, to get the work published is to share the fruit of your effort. And as you said earlier on, it's more of inner satisfaction rather than monetary gain. There's not much monetary gain, get your paper published. A lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of time, but you don't get monetary gain for that. And the third is to more of recognition of your standing, that you are expert in that field. You are recognized as a leader or key opinion leader for that field because you do the work and you get published. But to get the work published, you as a first author, it's not easy. Because only one author. There are many people who, the one author will be the people who are really the big professor and the one who initiate the study. So it's always not easy for you to be the first author. Your response to your question to get this medical writer, I don't think that is, to me, I don't use that. It's because you do the work, you understand more, you plant the seed, you see the tree grow, and you want to get your fruit tasted by all the other people, not the medical writer one. So it's a matter of how you think that your work is value or not. If you think that your work is value, and sometimes we know this, we get the reviewer who are really cut and paste, to me, cut and paste reviewer, who just cut and paste and asking something which he also doesn't understand what your work what your work is try to get across. You think that you have done the thing and you trust in the editor. Probably your editor can save you. Probably you go and pursue the response. But you think that the editor also is not supportive to you because and also the comment that they asked, what they requested is something beyond that you're able to do. I would send another channel.
Well, is Afzal with us? Afzal from Dhaka? I don't think so. Professor Marco, any suggestion regarding, very often we get totally send the paper. It comes back. One reviewer has rejected, one has clearly accepted, and third one is sitting on the fence. And the statistical reviewer has put in, too many questions to you.
First, the message delivered by Dejan, one of the message, how to select the good journal. When I say good journal, is journal with interest for this kind of research. I give you an example on error. We conduct a research in collaboration with University of Human Science in Toulouse. Okay? And we use for this research the methodology of human science. And because this study was conducted during AICT-AsiaPCR with young fellow, well done, following the methodology of human science. And then because of we tried to publish this result in the European Art Journal, where the reviewer did not understood the methodology and so on. So there was an error to send these studies, research, well conducted in a journal, namely AsiaIntervention journal. We have to send this paper to the correct journal. Then, if we follow the comments, we have to take into consideration the comment or the criticism sent by the reviewer, step by step, and exactly like Dejan demonstrate, look if it is correct or not correct. And then maybe you will recognize that our ignorance, we didn't know that, and then we have to improve the quality of what we do. And then it's a way to go to the publication. We have to follow exactly what, and take the opportunity of the reviewer comment to improve our skill.
Yeah, so take all the comments which have come back sportingly, not, he has attacked you.
Yeah.
So I think that's very important. We come to the last part, and that's very important. Having published an article in a journal, you want to amplify the message to, more and more people. And especially if you go to Twitter, you'll see Sripal Bangalore has tweeted. Before you have read the article, he's already tweeted. Roxana Mehran or Greg Stone has tweeted, you gain 5 kgs of weight. So how to do that? That's very important. And for that, we have Priyadarshini going to talk about how do you boost your career by promoting your papers on the social media. And there's plenty of social media available.
Thank you, AICT-PCR, for giving me this opportunity. I do not have any conflict of interest to declare. As Professor Call rightly introduced, that before, once the articles gets out and there is so much tweet and social. Yes, sure. There is so much, noise in the social media. So I would like to begin that you might have written the best article in the world, but who is going to see it if you don't promote it? So social media has become an essential tool for research promotion, and the use has increased from 7% to 65% in the last 1 decade. Publishing an article in a journal will only give 50% chance of getting cited, and promotion and distribution of the articles will need to be the other 50% as cited by many researchers. There are two more important social media as well as academic social network sites, and they have shown a positive effect on impact factors, citation counts, and research rankings. So the benefits of being on social media is that you can enhance participation in a scientific meeting from near or from far. You can engage easily with others who have similar clinical focus. You can share and discuss cases, journals, articles in the platform. So it can be used as one of the search engine, and also there is an opportunity to interact with many specialties and many countries, that you would normally meet. It's basically open your horizons. As quoted by Dr. Chadi, we are in the era of collective intelligence, so we need to listen, learn, and share. So there are various platforms, which are used, by many researchers. So I will talk mainly about the three most popular platforms of social media. One is the Facebook. So you all know that this is primarily a professional as well as a personal social media platform. But you can use Facebook to promote your research and link other social media platforms and journals, because there are so many journals which are present in Facebook. Indeed, most of the journals are present in Facebook, so it's a very good way to follow them through Facebook. So Twitter, actually, it's one of the most, as Dr. Kaul mentioned, one of the most used, I would say, social media by researchers. But in the Twitter, you can basically tweet, and it has word limitations. So, but that's something researchers are doing a lot these days, and it's one of the really good way to promote your latest research in a small tweet, interesting tweet, and also you can, load your conference presentation and put your blogs. So third one I'm going to talk about is LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is purely a professional networking platform to share updates on your work within a specific group or a broader audience. So it's one of the dedicated professional network where you can network and connect with a lot of people, and also for young researchers, it's a good way to find jobs through this network. So I also talked about academic social network sites. So this is not like social media, but this is called academic social network sites, purely meant for academicians and researchers. So there are two types of, we call it ASNS in a short form. So the first one is basically academia.edu and ResearchGate. And these two are mainly used through profile curation and uploading your research papers. So since the launch of these two ASNS, it was launched a decade ago, academia.edu have already 65 million followers, and ResearchGate have around 15 million followers. And these are purely researchers who are, linked to this media platforms. And the features that you can, do is the functions, basically. You can follow others on their papers. Basically, you can upload your research papers, and you can post questions and discuss about the paper. You can also block your posts. It is also like a kind of like a informal peer reviewer. You can host papers, conferences, and talks in this platform. They have very recently started a DOI service. And the best part about this is it gives a very good metrics, like citation metrics, an RG score and an H index metric. So all these metrics comes, on the platform, and you can see, your paper, all in the through this metrics. And they have just recently started, a platform, job listing on that platform. Also, papers uploaded to academia and ResearchGate were reported to receive a boost to citation when compared to papers not available online. Again, this is cited by some of the papers published. The other one that I had mentioned is called Mendeley. Basically, this is not through profile curation. This is mainly work based on you're publishing your papers. So Mendeley actually helps you grow your network by joining groups in a particular field of research. So they have just started the social media actually platform. So before that, it was not there. Also, Mendeley offers the opportunity to quantify engagement with individual papers through readership counts, which have been shown to be a good proxy again for citation counts. Again, this has been cited in some of the papers. This is just to understand, that there are various overlaps between all these social media platforms. But just to give a brief idea, like most of them, they are basically divided under 3 categories. One is through the profile curation, like academia, ResearchGate, and ORCID that I talked about it. Then there are discussion platforms like Facebook, Twitter. These are mainly for discussion platforms. And also there is something, obviously I did not talk about it, that is content creation like YouTube and Instagram and like WordPress, and also you can even go on that too. So just kind of some tips to make an impressive social account. So it is important that you decide on your objective, because that will give you the right platform, because you will not have so much of time to be present in so many social platforms. You need to have a good username and handle that will allow people to identify you. One of the handle that I really like is called Rota Monster, and he's a Rota master, and he's very interesting. So I think social media needs to be a little interesting. So I think you need to have this kind of names which are very attractive. You can upload a very good professional photo, so that people recognize you well. You need to write a short description about yourself, like what are you, like you're an intervention cardiology, you're currently a director of cath lab, you are interested in clinical research and various things. And you can provide your other social media profiles on the homepage, like your Facebook, Twitter, all the accounts. Also, it's good if you follow key opinion leaders or various societies like Latin Bifurcation Club and all. They are so interesting. So many discussions goes on in the Twitter, through these clubs. And if you're confident, start sharing your own opinions. Share what you are passionate about. Some tips to promote your research. Yes, so you need a strategy because you need to know what target you want to what audience you want to target, and what are your interests. You have to be committed because you need to post regularly so that people takes your social media interesting, and you have to you can add various pictures, videos, and relevant hashtags which are very important. You can make it short, catchy, and attractive so that your audience takes interested, like I gave some example before. Obviously, good infographics needs required web designer, so you can think about that. Today in the world of technology, we all should use L-Metrics, Kudos, and ORCID. L-Metrics will give you an idea where your paper is going, across the globe. Kudos is basically a global, very simple, global way to reach your paper. Basically, in this, you have to write your paper, describe it in very simplified English, so that anybody who wants to read and understand your paper gives the 5 key points. So these are, and also these are some of the technologies which can tell you where your papers is, where is it going on in the whole world. It's a teamwork that you need to do. You need to engage with your people. So not just tweet, you want to, like kind of engage yourself with your fellow colleagues and everyone. We should be also mindful about the cultural and geographical differences. Like in China, most of these are not there. So WeChat is one of the way you can promote in China. These are some of the interesting profiles I keep seeing in Twitter. So this is Professor Mirvat, and as you can see, like she has written, everything on the description. This is the editorial board in the circulation intervention. She's there in PCR online, use these features, but I don't know much about this. And obviously to be in online clubs and quizzes. And you can also always load good pictures, and you can retweet any interesting post that you see. So I would like to conclude with the principles of some principles. So the do's are: consider what potential employers or colleagues will see when they find you on social media. Decide which social channel is important for you, because you can always mix a personal, professional, but then, like as I said, objective is very important, and that will take you to the right platform. Create content that can forward by people, and you can retweet or repost. Some don'ts are like, don't say you are an expert, show it by your content, and limit your social media activity to one topic so that you are known as one of the expert for, or on that particular topic. And last but not the least, don't violate any company policies. Check what your rules are when you set around social media. So I would like to conclude with the famous quote, publish or perish. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Priyadarshini, for working so hard to tell us how to become famous. That's very important. Dijan, what do you say about going to social media? Yourself or somebody else should go for you?
What is it good for? I think is dissemination of the important papers. It is much easier, and I do sometimes follow some of the people online who report on the new studies. And if it is done in an efficient way, that is, I think, one good reason to be on Twitter, because then you can see what the new results are, what was interesting, or what should be focused on in a short sentence. And then you go, of course, and read more. And you may have missed it. If you did not have time to go through the journal or whatever, you may have missed it. So I think that's an important new channel of conveying messages. However, it can be very deceiving, I think. So I guess that it's important that it is used as, I would even say, as, the news that we have. So it's basically, there is a title, you get interested in it, and then you dig into it deeper and try to understand the whole paper, the conclusions, and so on. But just to take it at face value is, I think, dangerous. So I would treat it as conveying basic information that arise your interest, and then you dig deeper.
Thank you. So I think in the interest of time, we want to hear some words of wisdom, what we should go back with, what message.
Thank you very much. I think this has been a wonderful experience and sessions as well. And let me just give you my take on this sessions, particularly with regard to the various talks by the speakers. Number one is Dr. Our chief editor of AsiaIntervention, Upendra Kaur, has said that AsiaIntervention is a young journal, but it is a young journal with a lot of momentum and a lot of reserve on the part of the board as well as the editorial editors to want to push the journal to a greater height. So this is something that we can take encouragement from. With regard to the first talk by Dr. Ganesan Katia, I agree with every bit of what you said. We learned from you that we need to tell a good story. Not only do we have to tell a good story, we have to tell a good story well as well. And so I learned from you that we need to have these three elements of quality of data, the methodology, and the clarity of thoughts. My personal take here is that there is actually an important element here for anybody who wants to research, and that is a research mentorship. You need to have a good mentor to guide you. You can't expect somebody to go and do research and write a paper out of the blue on his own. So in my center, we actually require every faculty staff to go for a 1 year of Master in Clinical Investigations where they are taught how to conduct a research. And from a perspective of a paper writing, you need to teach a fellow how to PubMed search, how to improve your medical writing skills, and at the same time also to actually do some statistical learning as well. So there are actually skills that you have to impart in your fellow before you can expect him to produce anything of quality. The second talk by our speaker is on the understanding what reviewers want by Dayan. Again, I do agree with you. We need to understand what the reviewers want. But my personal take here is that consider it a privilege that somebody who has taken the trouble to look at your paper, to think about it, and write back to you. And consider it also that this is a learning experience. So don't get too upset or personal when you have too many comments. Some of it may be negative, but somebody has bothered to reply to you. And so take it positively as you continue to work on your paper. The third part of which is our Dr. Priya Dashini. This is social media is obviously a new world order, something very unfamiliar to me in my generation. You talk about the social media of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I have none of them, so I'm completely anonymous on social media. But that does not mean that I do not support social media. That does not mean that I do not recognize the immense power of this particular new medium here in terms of its ability to disseminate information and news and so forth. So it is a learning process for me, and I'm still a work in progress as far as social media goes. So for that, thank you very much for all the panelists for your wonderful contribution to this very new sessions that will come about. I also particularly want to thank the 10 people who have stayed with us till the very end of this sessions. Thank you very much and have a nice evening. See you tomorrow.
Thank you very much.